we're using the complex conjugates theorem. So the example here, write the polynomial of least degree that has rational coefficients, a leading coefficient of 1, and the given zeros. And so we're given these three zeros, 2, 2i, and 4 minus the square root of 6. 2's fine. We can have that 0 by itself. But the positive 2i, we also have to include a negative 2i. And we also have to, because of the irrational conjugate theorem, we have 4 minus the square root of 6. We also have to include 4 plus the square root of 6. So they gave us originally 3 zeros, but because of the conjugate theorems that we know that we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we get done, we should have a polynomial degree 5. That's what we should have when we're all finished. And so we get started with the process. And the first thing we have to do is we have to write it in factored form. And so we're going to take all these 5 zeros, and we're just going to subtract them from x. So we have x minus 2, then we have x minus 2i, then I'm going to write down the next I, which is x minus a negative 2i, and then we have our first conjugate pair here, or first square root here. And so we say x minus, and we have to make sure that minus gets distributed to both parts, minus the square root of 6. And then we have, the parentheses there. Then we have x minus 4 plus the square root of 6. So the parenthesis ends that, and then we have to finish up the multiplication term there. So the first thing is that I'm going to start with these two terms or these two binomials on the outside, these polynomials on the outside, and start multiplying those together. So I'm going to write down the first couple polynomials. So x minus 2, x minus 2i, and minus a negative, that becomes x plus 2i. So I'm going to leave those there so I don't forget that I still have to deal with those once I finish simplifying the right side over here. First thing is that I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute the negative to all of the terms here. So the negative goes to the 4 and the negative square root, and the negative goes to the 4 and the positive square root. So x negative times 4 is negative 4. Negative times negative square root is positive square root of 6. And then x times negative, or we write down the x, negative times negative 4 is negative 4. And negative times positive square root is negative square root of 6. Now, this is going to be grouping. And difference of squares. We're kind of doing this backwards. Okay. So it's grouping because we have x minus 4 and x minus 4. So we're going to group this together, and we can see that if we multiply x minus 4, it's joined by multiplication, x minus 4 times x minus 4, that is going to give us x minus 4 squared. Now, the reason we can do difference of squares here is because we have a minus sign and a plus sign, so these are conjugates. They both are the same term. We have x minus 4 and x minus 4 for the binomial for the first part, and then we have the square root of 6 in the square root of 6 for the second part. And so when we work it backwards, it's difference, so we have to make sure that we include the minus sign, and then we can combine those and they become 6. And then we still have all of these things out front that we haven't written down yet, or we haven't dealt with yet. So we get x minus 2, x minus 2i, x plus 2i, and then still times multiplied there. Okay. So we know that x minus 4, if we write that down, it's actually x minus 4 times x minus 4. So x minus 2, x minus 2i, x plus 2i, and then we say times x minus 4, x minus 4, and then minus 6. So we have to multiply these two binomials together. So x times x is x squared, x times negative 4 is negative 4x, negative 4 times x is negative 4x, and negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16, and we can bring down the minus 6. And we still have our binomials out front. And those are joined by multiplication. Then we can combine like terms. And again, so we combine like terms here. We get x squared minus 8x, and we have two more like terms here. 16 minus 6 is 10. All right. And now, again, right here, we have difference of squares again. So difference of squares. And so what would be, if we have x and x, those two squared, that is going to be x squared. And negative 2 and positive 2, so we know that we're dealing with difference of squares. And this has to be negative 4, and that would be what would give us I and I. That would be I squared. So we have the difference of squares there. And then we still have our x minus 2 out front. We also remember that I squared, that's equal to negative 1. So we can rewrite all of this. Nothing with our first binomial, x minus 2. Then we can write down x squared and negative 4. I squared is equal to negative 1. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. And then we have our trinomial down here on the end, x squared minus 8x plus 10. Now in the front, we can multiply these together. And so we get x times x squared is x cubed. X times 4 is plus 4x. And negative 2 times x squared is negative 2x squared. And negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. So now we have a cubic function multiplied by a quadratic function. So now we just have to make sure that we multiply all these terms together. And I'm going to start with x squared. So x squared times x to the third is x to the fifth. X squared times 4x is 4x to the third. X squared times negative 2x is negative 2x to the fourth. And x squared times negative 8 is negative 8x squared. Then we have negative 8x times x to the third is negative 8x to the fourth. 8x times 4x is negative 32x squared. 8x times negative 2x squared is positive. Let me make sure I'm doing that right. Yep. Okay. Negative 8x times negative 2x squared is positive 16x cubed. And negative 8x times negative 8x is positive 64x. Then we have our last term, which is 10. So 10 times x cubed is plus 10x cubed. And then we have 10 times 4x is 40x. And 10 times negative 2x is negative 20x squared. And 10 times negative 8 is negative 80. All right. And then we can combine like terms, and this will be the last step. So the highest degree that we have x to the fifth. So we'll write that one down, x to the fifth. And then the next term that we come to is we want to come to x, or whatever the fourth degree is. So we have 1, 2. We have 2 that are x to the fourth. Negative 2 plus negative 8 is negative 10 x to the fourth. Then we have a third degree, which we have a 4 to the x to the third, and a 16x to the third, and a 10x to the third. And we add all those together. So that's 26 plus 4. That becomes 30x to the third. Then we have our x squared, so negative 8x, negative 32x, that becomes negative 40x, and negative 20x squared, so that becomes negative 60x squared. And then we have our linear term, which is a positive 64 and a positive 40, so that becomes plus 104x. And then last, we can write down our constant, which is negative 80. All right, and so we were asked to write down the polynomial of least degree that has rational coefficients, a leading coefficient of 1, and the given zeros. So we figured out that the given zeros were 2i, 4 minus the square root of 6, negative 2i, and 4 plus the square root of 6. So we knew it was a degree 5. So there's the degree 5, and our leading coefficient of 1, and all the rest of our coefficients are rational.